Hi, Eric Weiss with NTSB Media Relations. Briefing you tonight will be board member Todd Inman, I-N-M-A-N, as well as investigator in charge Bryce Banning, B-R-I-C-E, Banning, B-A-N-N-I-N-G. Thank you.
Investigator in charge.
Investigator in charge.
Let me just start with, whenever we began our first press conference, I guess 2 or 3 days ago, we gave the condolences to the families of the 67 victims in this accident. And tonight, we also need to give the condolences to yet another set of individuals due to the Philadelphia crash. Our hearts go out to all of them. Nobody should suffer this much tragedy, no matter what time frame in between it. But know this, we will find out what happened in both of those accidents. We will make recommendations, and we will attempt to never have to deal with those type of accidents again. I want to give you just a couple of facts right off the bat, just in case there's any questions. Last year, the NTSB investigated across all modes 1,288 different events. Aviation accounted for 1,204 of those. We currently have open 1,145 investigations in aviation. Last year, we had multiple accidents with 6 or more fatalities. Across all of our modes, which are primarily aviation, we dealt with 343 fatalities. We currently have open 1,100 recommendations, and in aviation, there are 283 that are still pending. The team that is working on this crash at DCA collectively has over 350 years of seniority with the NTSB. We will find out what happened, and we will do everything we can to prevent it. But I don't want anyone to think because we are working 2 accidents. This is what we do. Week in and week out. Just today, a lot more people are paying attention to it. I want to take an opportunity to introduce Bryce Banning. He hasn't really spoken the last couple of times, but he's been working hard, putting together a lot of information. Bryce joined the NTSB in 2012 as a senior aircraft investigator. He's been the investigator in charge on hundreds of aircraft investigations. He's an airline transport pilot with commercial privileges for single-engine land and sea, certified flight instructor, multi-engine instructor, and instrument instructor. He's also a certified airframe and power plant mechanic. Bryce has accumulated over 8,000 hours of flight time in all types of aircraft, ranging from Pipers to Navajos, King Airs, and Lear. He served in multiple management positions for multiple airlines, and he has been leading this team since the inception. He's going to brief you on some details that we have, and then we'll come back with some additional details.
Thank you. The flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder from the PSA aircraft were recovered on Thursday in the late afternoon by the FBI dive team. The CVR and the FDR were provided to engineers at the NTSB Vehicle Recorders Division immediately after recovery. Both the FDR and the CVR were a L3 Harris Communications FA 2100 type. Both recorders are solid-state memory digital recorders. Both the CVR and the FDR were downloaded successfully. The FDR contains about 400 parameters and is currently being analyzed by a FDR working group consisting of the NTSB, FAA, and PSA. The CVR contained about 2 hours and 4 minutes of good quality audio. ADSB and FDR time were correlated. Timing will continue to be refined. Times are in Eastern Standard Time and are preliminary. The FDR captures the entirety of the accident flight. The CVR audio, because it is only 2 hours in duration, starts mid-flight. Prior to initial descent, the crew briefed the arrival for the Troops 5 arrival, followed by an ILS approach to runway 1 at DCA. Around 8:15, the aircraft left 37,000 feet for an initial descent. At 8:39:10, Potomac approach cleared the crew for the Mount Vernon visual runway 1 approach. At 8:43:06, the crew made initial contact with the DCA tower. The tower controller then asked if the crew could switch to runway 33. After a brief discussion between the crew, they agreed to runway 33. At 8:45:27, the autopilot was disconnected. At 8:46:01, a radio transmission from the tower was audible, informing Pat 25 that traffic just south of the Wilson Bridge was a CRJ at 1,200 feet circling to runway 33. At 8:46:29, the crew received a 1,000-foot automated call-out. At 8:46:47, DCA tower cleared other jet traffic on runway 1 for departure with no delay. At 8:47:29, the crew received a 500-foot automated call-out. At 8:47:39, a radio transmission from the tower was audible asking Pat 25 if the CRJ was in sight. 1 second later, the crew received an automated traffic advisory stating traffic. At 8:47:42, a radio transmission from the tower was audible directing Pat 25 to pass behind the CRJ. At 8:47:58, the crew had a verbal reaction, and FDR data showed the airplane beginning to increase its pitch. Sounds of impact were audible about 1 second later, followed by the end of the recording. A CVR group consisting of party representatives from the NTSB, PSA, ALPA, and the FAA has been convened. The group is currently working to transcribe the entirety of the CVR recording verbatim. Thank you.
We will take some questions at the end, but we have some additional details we definitely want to brief you on today. I want to clarify something that was, I think, presented by NTSB at some form, specifically around air traffic control. The Washington DCA tower was communicating out any transmission on a VHF and UHF frequency. Any transmission would come out on both bands. The Black Hawk was transmitting out with a UHF band, while the CRJ jet was transmitting out with a VHF. To put that in context, both the airplane and the helicopter would hear any air traffic control, but they would not hear the other aircraft or helicopter, conversely, if they were transmitting out. I bring that up because we are now working through the transcript of the air traffic control, and many people have heard online different recordings. Those do not contain the UHF radio transmissions. What they're hearing is the VHF recorded on certain software programs. As we synchronize the timing on that, we hope to be able to release it tomorrow. We do have it. We're working through the synchronization because the specific time will be very critical. Now, a few updates in regard to the Black Hawk helicopter. We can verify it was on a training flight that would utilize night vision goggles. We do not know at this time if the night vision goggles were actively being worn, nor what the setting may be. Further investigation should be able to let us know if that occurred and what factor it may play in the overall accident. We do know that and we announced the combination CVR and the flight data recorder was extracted last night from the aircraft. When it was brought to our lab and opened, there was a water intrusion. Again, this is not uncommon. If you recall in the CRJ, that cockpit voice recorder also had a water intrusion. It is going through the same process of ionized water until it's put into a vacuum oven. We still are very confident we will have that data. On the Black Hawk, we can confirm that we are looking into a priority air transport, and that's where you hear PAT, that on the prior day, PAT 11 was in close contact with a Republic Air flight. The Republic Air flight rejected the landing and did a go-around. The reason we are bringing this up is our data currently shows there was over 1,000 feet of separation between those two aircraft. 1,000 feet is a good safety barrier. Obviously, the pilot made its own decision in rejecting the landing. We just wanted to bring that fact out. It will be considered in the overall evaluation of this accident. So now let's go on to controllers. At the time of the accident, there were 5 controllers in the air traffic control tower cab at DCA. One was a local controller, which was handling not only helicopter, but fixed-wing aircraft. The local controller also would be handling arrivals and departures close in airspace and the use of the runway. There was a ground controller, which was handling all aircraft and vehicles, not on the runway. In addition, there was a local assist controller. This person is responsible for assisting the local controller in any type of actions that are needing, reviewing data, scanning the field, a multitude of different things. You will not hear the assistant controller on any of the ATC tapes, but we can confirm that person was in the cab. In addition, there's an operations supervisor who has direct oversight over the tower. This is someone who manages everyone that's involved in the operation, along with an operational supervisor in training. That leads us to confirm there were 5 people in the tower at the time of the accident. At this time, we have interviewed the local controller, the ground controller, and the local assist controller. We anticipate having the interviews with the operations supervisor and the supervisor in training conducted no later than Monday evening. And for a little bit of context, this is a controller's worst nightmare. It hits everyone that works in that cab and knows them very hard. These interviews take a long time, not because there's that much talking, but there's several breaks that occur for emotions, just to be able to compose themselves to talk about what happened. We want to be thorough. If we need to go back for additional information, we absolutely will. We're getting full cooperation and access to those individuals we need. And we hope, again, to have them completed no later than Monday. Now we're going to talk a little bit about altitude. And I'm going to preface this, and we're going to try to work through your questions. But I want to be very clear. Our team has had some internal debate on releasing one part of this. And whenever I explain it, I hope you will understand why. When we received the recorders from the CRJ, we were able to define an altitude of where it was very close to the time of impact. That is a data point we feel very comfortable with. We also have an initial set of information in regard to what was being seen on the cab in the control tower. We have not finalized that and need to get more granularity to it. And we currently don't have the readout from the Black Hawk. I put all that into context for you in that whenever I give you some altitude information, one part of the three pieces we have defined. Another part we feel fairly confident but need to get more information, and a third we don't even have. Currently, the CRJ, based upon the data recorder, at the time of impact was at 325 feet, plus or minus 25 feet. This is from the belly of the CRJ. The CRJ itself is 20 feet and 8 inches from the wheel to the top of the tail. So from the belly, the CRJ at time of impact was 325, less or minus 25 degrees. And for those who follow this closely, that is a corrected altitude. It is based on the ADSB data and the flight data recorder. Our preliminary review of what the tower cab was showing on the data screen that would have been in front of the controllers was 200 feet near the time of the accident. Again, this data is preliminary. Tomorrow, we feel very comfortable that we'll be getting the additional data sources that will confirm precisely what it would have been on the screen at the time. And I would also caution you, there's typically in the cab on that screen, it may be a 4 to 5 second refresh rate. But obviously, this is something that we're going to be looking at very closely. The third prong of that is the helicopter recorders. Between those three, whenever we have those data points finalized, we feel that we'll be very comfortable in saying exactly what altitude this occurred at. And I know that's been a lot of speculation. You may have a few questions on it, but I want to caution, we're trying to give you what information we have and we verified at that time. With that, we'll take some questions. Just one second. Ma'am?
Claudia from the AP. So you said that the altitude, and the recorder recorded the altitude of the CRJ. Was it trying to pull up before the collision? Was that what you were saying?
The question was the altitude that was read from the ADSB and the voice recorder, was it trying to pull up? I can tell you at one point very close to the impact, there was a slight change in pitch, an increase in pitch. That is something that we will get you more detail on, but it was an indication of an increase in pitch.
Thank you, Todd Grady, Triple with Fox. So are you also saying that there was a 100-foot discrepancy between what the air traffic controller was seeing on the screen in front of them and what the height, the altitude of the plane? There was a 100 feet difference?
So the question is, was there a 100 feet difference between what we found the plane to be operating at and the air traffic control tower? I'm saying the initial data we have on the control tower cab says 200 feet would have been visualized. This is a fairly good estimate, but it needs to be finalized. I shouldn't say estimate. It's a fairly good initial read. It needs to be finalized. And again, the CRJ was operating at 325 feet, plus or minus 25.
And how common is it that the two aircraft would be operating on different frequencies with the same control tower?
The question is, how common would it be that the two aircraft would be operating on separate frequencies? It is completely common. Military operates on one frequency, civilian on another. We're just trying to clarify that because you're only reading something or hearing some things online, so we're trying to get out and dispel some myths. Yes, sir.
Mr. Edmund, Dave Laval with DC News Now. At this point, you've given us the CRJ, but can you speculate on the altitude of the PAT at this point?
We cannot the question is, can we give any information on the altitude of the PAT? We cannot at this point. Obviously, an impact occurred, and I would say when an impact occurs, that is typically where the altitude of both aircraft were at the moment. But again, whenever we have the data from the recorder, we will be able to give you more specific.
And just to follow up, if I may, sir, there have been reports, can you comment on reports that PAT may have flown above its max limit for that airspace?
So the question was, can I comment on reports that PAT may have flown above its max limits? No, because I haven't heard that. And I don't try to look at the media that much. So by not saying that, I'm not denying, but I just haven't heard it. We haven't discussed it. I'll ask the investigator in charge. Do you have any information on that?
Yeah, I can provide just a little bit of context. The PAT 25 was within the lateral boundaries of a helicopter route. The ceiling of that route was 200 feet. As Member Inman said, we have not got the data out of the FDR for the Black Hawk at this time, but that's what we know.
Okay, we're going to go down here.
David Kaplan with Fox 5 here in D.C. You mentioned as you walked through the timeline that there was a broadcast over the cockpit of traffic. Can you talk about what indications, if any, you have that the plane's anti-collision system was working? It's my understanding that broadcast goes out if the system has been activated. Can you comment on what you've learned about the anti-collision system?
The question is about the traffic that was heard on the cockpit voice recorder. I can say this: we are defining what is inside of each system and what they were outputting. Because of the unique nature of military aircraft, we need additional specialization, which we have. But for right now, we're trying to present you with what we've heard. So we need further information to be able to find why it was indicating traffic. Yes?
The night goggles. How will you determine if they were wearing the night goggles or not?
The question was, how will we determine if they were wearing the night vision goggles or not? Part of that will be based, and we already know during the extraction of the bodies, how they were presented and what was around them. I can say that impact was very significant. And so it will take additional analysis of their helmets, the attached areas. We're looking to find if the night vision goggle bags, whenever we extract the aircraft, are they empty? Are they found in the debris field? There's a lot of different variables we need to find out before we determine that. Yes?
Thanks, Chase Williams, Fox Business. I know that it was 4 minutes before impact that there was a runway switch. They switched to 33. How routine is that? And is that enough lead time for pilots and other traffic in the area to be aware of, a change in the patterns?
Okay, so the question was in regard to, and the term you used was runway switch. And we briefed this yesterday. The CRJ was on approach to runway 33. They'd been brought in that way. As they were coming in, they were asked by the air traffic control, could they accept, let me reverse that. They were coming in on runway 1. As they were on approach, the air traffic controller said, can you accept runway 33? That is not an uncommon occurrence at DCA. It creates an arcing of the flight path, so it's very normal. Pilots were able to discuss it. They accepted it. They appear to be on a proper, at least, lineup at that time. So right now we'll evaluate it with all the other facts and data, but it is what it is at this point, I guess. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Dominique Moody with NBC Washington. I just have a question about the staffing in the air tower. Can you tell me if that's common for it to have that level of staffing, or is it traditionally more people inside of the cabin?
The question was the staffing at the time of the actual accident with the 5 individuals. I have not gotten an update from the air traffic control people. I know the primary thing we wanted to get was exactly that, and there's been discussions because, again, typical can change based on the day of the week, the time, the weather. So we will not categorize anything as typical right now until we can present it in a better fashion. Yes, sir.
Eric Gilchrist, NBC News. If I heard you
correctly, you said that the tower was able to see the airplane at 200 feet. The tower instruments read it at 200 feet. Did it not read where the helicopter was at the same time?
The question was, it was reading the airplane. Could it not read the helicopter? It could read the helicopter. And the reason why I'm saying it could, and this is again getting into more specific information, the definition that's needed for us to evaluate that further will be downloaded tomorrow. Do you want to answer a little bit on how those control towers, or I'm happy to continue. Okay. Those monitors obviously assimilate different pieces of information. So our initial read was showing that. We're giving you the 200 feet as indicative of the CRJ. I don't want to speculate specifically on the Black Hawk. Sorry, it's reversed, right? Come on.
So, as previously stated, we know that the FDR and data provided indicated that the CRJ was at 325 feet, plus or minus 25 feet. We also, initial preliminary data right now indicates that on the tower's radar scope that was available to the controller, initial data indicates that he may have seen 200 feet. That needs to be verified. Our ATC group is working it. We will have more data available, but those are the initial indications.
And no indication for the Black Hawk, though, on that screen at that same time?
The data that I'm talking about, the 200-foot data that would have been available on that radar scope, that was the Black Hawk. The 325-foot that we've given you is ADSB data, FDR data, other data combined to get an accurate altitude of the CRJ, 325 plus or minus 25. The radar data, where that helicopter is down at 200 feet, it has less fidelity. So our team is looking into that, but I think it's important to note that this is a complex investigation. There's a lot of pieces here. Our team is working very hard to gather this data, make sure we, as Member Inman has said, understand why this happened.
Sorry, Bryce. Can I...
Hang on, I'll call on people. Yes, ma'am. So the question again, and I'm going to try to say this one more time. The CRJ, at the time of impact, based on ADSB data and the voice and the data and the flight recorder, shows that airplane was positioned at 325 feet, plus or minus 25 feet. On the radar scope in the cab, our preliminary review shows that the Black Hawk helicopter would have visualized at 200 feet. It's not as defined. That is preliminary. We will get more significant information. We wanted to present the 325 plus or minus because we knew that. We have good certainty with it, but without presenting it with the radar scope information or with presenting that, it could cause some conflict. So I'm going to be very careful to make sure we still have a lot more work to do. These are one of thousands of data points and will be hundreds of thousands of pages. We're trying to release the information as we know it and make sure we're giving the best information that's accurate and learning from it. Yep.
Yesterday you talked about spending time with some of the victims' families. Can you describe any sort of update today with them?
Well, the question is about spending time with the members' families. Yeah, I spent several hours with them today. There's more, some new. There's some that have been there for 3 days. There's some that want to give us hugs. There's some that are just mad and angry. They're just all hurt, and they still want answers, and we want to give them answers. And the most devastating thing, I guess, today was they watched the news last night. They know their loved ones They're thinking, is it going to take longer? Am I not going to find my loved one? How will this affect it? That's hard. I mean, it's horrible. It's horrible. And no one should suffer this. So, yeah, it is hard on them. They have a lot of questions. They haven't been through this. Unfortunately, we have a lot of experts. We've done 1,000, but that doesn't mean it's not completely new to them. What's really horrible, though, is that these things are happening. I keep a challenge coin. Whenever I first got to the NTSB, they asked, it's a challenge coin you hand to people as a sign of gratitude and respect. In front of it has the seal and the name. I said, what do you want to put on the back? This was on the front door of our training center where the TW-800 was for many years. From tragedy, we draw knowledge to improve the safety for us all. That's what we're doing right now. We're dealing with tragedy, but we need to improve safety. We need 200 plus recommendations fixed. We need people to take action. Unfortunately, at some point, all of you are going to be gone. We're still going to have the investigation open. We're going to make recommendations. We go to East Palestine, a community that gets devastated. Still nothing's happened. We have several hundred recommendations open for aviation. You want to do something about it? Adopt the recommendation of the NTSB. You'll save lives. Get off and do something. I don't want to have to meet with another set of those parents like that again. It's not fair. Could be your family. Sorry, I didn't mean to take it out on you. It's just hard. Sorry. Yeah.
I have two, and I just want to follow up because I want to make sure I understand the elevation question correctly. The flight data recorder on the CRJ is showing 325 plus or minus 25. That's correct, right?
The question is, and I apologize, I've said this 3 or 4 times, on the CRJ, the flight data recorder that has been localized from the ADSB data and other is showing the time of impact. It was at 325 plus or minus 25 feet.
Okay. The 200 feet inside of the air traffic control cab was for the helicopter. Is that
the question again? The preliminary data that we have not validated yet and are still trying to verify was that the radar scope was showing the helicopter at 200 feet. Now, again, we're not saying plus or minus because we don't really know that. It's not as granular. We will have the exact data set tomorrow evening. We knew you would have some questions, so please be responsible in reporting this. We need more info, but we know that some of that information is coming out, and we're trying to provide it. No more. Sorry, I've answered the same question several times. Sorry. Go ahead.
This is just a clarification point on this topic. I understand what the radar scope in the ATC cap was showing and what the black box showed you from the CRJ. I guess the question is, what would explain the discrepancy, which appears to be 100 feet, when clearly they hit each other?
So the question is, what would explain this discrepancy? That's what our job is to figure that out. That's what we're doing. That's the reason we're giving you information to dispel some information that may be out there. We're the gold standard across the world because we tell the facts. And sometimes we have to give a little bit something preliminary so that you don't have an improper picture. That's what we're trying to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
The 4 to 5 second delay that you described, where was that?